Today we are going to be talking about how to make this awesome shop from Pet Simulator 99 in Roblox Studio. And we're going to be going over how you can do things like these button animations. And one thing to note while we're creating this is Pet Simulator uses a lot of custom icons like this one up here. And so instead of using these icons, we're going to be using icons from the Vector icon pack, which I'll have links down below. This is an amazing icon pack that's used in a ton of games right now. All right, so I've opened up a blank base plate here. And the first thing we're just going to do is create a new GUI. And we'll just call this GUI. Now the first thing we need is a frame. We'll center this by setting the anchor point to 0.5, 0.5. And then come down here to position and type in 0.5, enter, and that'll auto center it at 0.5, 0.5. One thing you'll notice about the shop window is that the scale of it stays consistent no matter what device you're on. And it's about twice as wide as it is tall. So here under our frame, we're going to add an aspect ratio constraint. And set this to 2. Now if we scale this up to 0.5, we'll see it's about the same dimensions as the shop here. Going back and forth, I think this might be more of a 1.75 ratio, like this. 2 looked a little too wide. Now one thing that's immediately noticeable is the curved edges and this nice gray border around it. And that's easy enough to do. We just need to add a UI stroke, make it pretty thick, and then set it to a nice gray. To get the curved corners, we'll add a UI corner and set the scale of the corner to 18. The next thing we want to do is put a shop icon up here in the corner. So we'll throw a new image label, set the anchor point to 0.3, 0.5. Make sure the background's transparent. And then we'll set the icon to this shop icon from the Vector icon pack. Call it icon. We'll add a UI aspect ratio constraint of 1 to make sure it retains its size. And I think it's a little small, so we'll scale it to 0.2. Okay, next up we need the title. So we'll add in a text label here, call it title. And we're going to start by making it transparent in the background and setting the anchor point to 0, 0.5. From there, the title is a little bit to the right of the corner. So we'll set the position here to 0.075. Then we can just scale it on up. And a good thing to note is that we're going to be using the font Freedoka 1, which comes native to Roblox, for all of the text within the shop window. Check text scaled, and then we'll make sure it's aligned to the left. We'll make the text white here, and then add a UI stroke. Try setting it to 5, and then we'll make it the same gray color as the border. And I'm actually going to bring this down a little bit, because I think it's darker in the game. Of course, instead of saying label, we want it to say exclusive shop. And be exciting. And now if we check back, we can see that we have the starters of the shop. Now before we make this button, one interesting thing about it is that when you hover over it, it scales up. When you click it, it scales down. But if you notice, the button is separated into 2 pieces. One of them presses down into the other and then releases when you release your cursor. And that gives it a super tactile, satisfying feel. Okay, so we'll start with a text button. Name it exit. I'm going to throw an aspect ratio constraint and make it 1.1. We'll set this anchor point to 0.7, 0.4. For the position, we'll do 1, 0, 0, 0. And the size, we'll type 0.125, press enter, and that will copy it to the next one. We're going to throw a UI corner and set it to 0, 16. And then we're going to set the background color of this button to 99, 9, 13. And we'll be reusing this color several times. Make sure auto button color is checked off, and then we'll delete all this text. As for the rest of the button, we're going to be putting it under. Start with the frame, call it color. Now put it at 0.5, 0.5 for the anchor, 0.5, 0, 0.42, 0 for the position, 0.895 for the X scale, 0 for the offset, and then 0.85 for the Y scale and a 0 for the offset. Now under this frame, we'll add a corner, set this to 0, 12. We'll add a stroke, making the thickness as 4, and this color will be the same color that the exit button was. Now what's going to make this look really good is adding a gradient. The rotation is going to be 110, and then watch for these colors. We'll use hashtag DD3134. The second color will be hashtag DF3274. The last thing we need to do is add a text label, call it X. This is what's going to have this little X. And then we'll also set anchor point to 0.5, 0.5. Position we'll set to 0.5, comma 0, comma 0.42, comma 0. And the size we'll do 0.5, comma 0, comma 0.7, comma 0. Background transparency to 1. Set it to Fredoka white color. And we'll type in a capital X here and then scale it up. Last thing to do is add a UI stroke to this. Set to 3.5 thickness and leave it as black. Now this button looks like this button. We still have to do this animation, but we'll take care of that later. And one final tweak, we're going to change this UI aspect ratio under the exit to actually 1.05. That looks a little bit more like it does in here. And to make sure that's accurate as possible, this gap seems a little too big. So we'll change the size of the color to 0.87 and shift it down to 0.44 on the Y. Now it's time to create the scrolling we see here. And we'll just do this by adding a scrolling frame. We'll call scroll. And we'll set this to 0, 0.5 for the anchor. Transparent background, set the position to 0.5 on the Y. And we're going to get a little funky with the size. We're going to go 1.009, 0, 1, 0. What that does, puts the scroll bar here on the edge of this frame. Now it is overlapping this exit button. We'll just make the Z index on this up to 5. While we're in scroll, we're going to make sure to come down to the scrolling settings down a little bit and set the scrolling direction to Y only. Now there are a couple things we need to do to lay out items in the frame like this. First thing we want to do is add a UI padding. We'll go here and we'll set all of these to 0.0250. Copy, paste, paste, paste. Then we'll add a UI list layout and a little bit more padding, 0.02. Set the horizontal alignment to center and we'll leave the rest of this as it is. The way items are laid out in this shop is with big frames, which encompass a selection of something you can buy, and these dividers, which have names. So we'll start by making the super starter pack. Inside the scroll, we're going to create a new frame, and we'll rename it to starter pack. We'll add a UI corner, and a UI stroke with a thickness of 4, and we'll use the same 3838 gray from the outside border. And we'll up this to 5. The anchor point of the starter pack, we'll do 0.5, 0. And we'll make sure the size stretches all the way left to right, and then we'll type in 0.5. This will make it pretty big for now, but you can see it scrolls out of frame. And when we adjust the canvas size of the scroll, we'll scale more normally. One thing I'm noticing here is that this scroll overlaps the icon and the title here. Let's go on both of these and set their Z index to 5. One side of it has a gap here and the other doesn't. So to fix that, we're going to go into the padding and add a little bit more padding on the right. But we might want to try 0.032. Sometimes UI can just be tweaking numbers, which isn't super fun. We're going to come on this scroll here and set the canvas size to 4 on the Y. That'll give us more room to scroll. Tweak this size down so it looks about starter pack here. Now the starter pack is nice and yellow, the gradient on it. So we'll add a gradient. And on one end, let's go nice and gold. And on the other, we'll leave it white. And then we'll rotate it 90 degrees. It's not quite accurate. I think we might need more of a yellow in the middle. So here, we'll add a yellow color. Pretty good. We'll get a text label, call it title, put the anchor point in the middle of the X, and then move it to the middle. Set the background as transparent like that, and then once again use Fredoka, scale that text up. We got to tweak the size, so it's not this default pixel size. We'll do 0.6, and maybe we'll try 0.25. Then we can go in here and type super starter pack. Set the text color to white and a UI stroke. Set to 4, and once again use this same gray color. Now the reason we set this text to white, when in the game it's this nice gold gradient, is because if we copy this gradient and paste it into here, moving the yellow like that, and we'll keep tweaking it until it looks as close to the in-game text as we can. Now the other most important thing we need in this is of course this purchase button. It uses some of the same animations as this X button. In my opinion, the easiest way to make that is actually just to copy and then paste this X into the starter pack, which we can do with Control-Shift-V. Of course, we can reset the anchor point and then reset the position, the size, and then we can use this as a base to create that Robux buy button. The first thing we're going to want to do is actually change the anchor point to the right side, and then we'll slide this all the way over to the right, maybe at 0.95, or if that looks a little far, 0.98, and down to 0.75. I'll call this button buy. And we'll notice that it's about a 2:1 aspect ratio instead of the 1.1 we had here. We'll change this to that base under there is looking like a pretty good outline. Now we'll come on the color and we're gonna have to tweak this value until it lines up with the edges. 0.96, pretty good. We'll make it a little taller on the Y. I think we could make it a little bit wider. We'll come back to this aspect ratio constraint and try like 2.2. Still looking pretty good, so I think safe to say we're good with that. So now we're gonna go into here and pick a new background color because this is a dark red and we obviously want this to be a dark green. We'll move this indicator over here. This is a little bit darker. We'll move this slider down. It's pretty good and it matches here. So we'll copy this color out of here, come paste it into the stroke here, and then we need to copy this gradient. Look like a little bit of a muted green on the bottom, right there for starter, and then a bright green up top. Set the rotation back to 90. And their whole thing looks a little bit more muted, less neon. Back in the gradient editor, we'll slide it yellow a little. That's pretty solid. Now we're going to come to this X and actually rename this to price. This is where we'll control what the number is. And we'll widen this to 0.9 and then set the text alignment to the right. 0.9 might be a little wide, so we'll try 0.8. And then this first cost is 240. We'll set this to 240 here. And of course you can rename this whatever you'd like. And then for the little Robux icon, add an image label, call it Robux. Set the anchor to 0.5. As always, throw that aspect ratio of 1, which it defaults to, and parent this under by because it wasn't there before. Bring this to halfway down the image, and we're going to want to scale it down considerably. So let's try 7.5 or even 0.7. Whoops, 7. We'll bump it over to the right just a little bit like this. This Robux image ID I'm going to use is also from the vector icon pack. And I'm going to use this asset ID, which is also from the vector icon pack, purchase button. Last thing we can do for fun here is scale it down just a little bit. Then we'll bring it down a little bit more. It's nice and even in that corner. And from here, the contents of your starter pack can be whatever you want. So we'll leave this blank. But if you want to add anything, you can come into starter pack here, add images, add text, whatever you're selling. Pet Simulator, of course, they're selling all of these items. One last thing I'll be adding behind this is these rays, kind of transparent, which they have behind Pet Simulator. You can find these sunburst transparent rays on Google with a quick search. So just grab one of those and throw that in. To do that, we'll make sure buy and title have a Z index of 5 here. Image label, rays, center it like so, and then set the size to 2 on the scale, aspect ratio constraint like this. Don't forget starter pack, lip descendant. And then come in here, set size constraint to relative XX like this. Keep this down to 1.5 or maybe even 1.25. So the background is transparent. The image is half transparent. We upload the fade and then we can tweak the size and transparency like we so wish. And once things are layered on top of it, it'll look a little bit better. Next, we'll create a divider like this to separate any sections we might want to create underneath the starter pack. Do that by adding a frame, calling it divider, and we'll just set the anchor point like that. And then play around with the size until it doesn't look too massive. Under it, we'll add a text label. It's called title. And we'll just center this and make sure it fills up the whole. And we'll use Ferdoka and that same gray from earlier, 38 repeating, scaled up. And if we want it to say top seller with fire emojis, we can copy these emojis off Emojipedia or any other website. We'll paste them in here and say top seller. You might want to shrink this text a little bit so it's not too annoying. Easy way to do that is by practicing with another padding and mess around with this until it looks good. From here, we have the building blocks of how we want to lay out our shop and duplicate this starter pack and this divider like this. And we can just keep layering things down, tweaking them however we want. And we can fill up this entire shop just like this one. But what you fill the shop with is going to depend on what you're selling in your game. So for now, the next thing we're going to hop on to making these buttons animate when we hover over them. So the first step to animate these buttons is going to be making a local script. So we're going to start with a folder actually inside our GUI. We're going to name scripts, and then inside this we'll add a local script. We're going to call this UI helper. Now the way we're going to use this script is we're going to have it loop through all of the descendants, so all of the children of the GUI here, and find anything that is a button, and then check if it has a certain tag on it, which we'll add in a minute. And if it has the right tag, it'll animate the button to do the bounce animation that we saw in Pet Simulator. To start off with, we're going to get some references. First one is going to be the GUI. Be the parent of the script, right? Start here, scripts, GUI. And then we're going to loop through UI descendants, apply effects. We'll go for nothing, descendant. There's GUI descendants. First, we're going to check if the descendant is a UI button, which can be a text button or an image button. Then we're going to want animate button. But instead of typing out all of the code to do that in this section, which I used to do a lot, but it gets super boilerplate, super annoying to look at, especially for the simple helper script, what we're actually going to do is come into replicated storage here and make a module. And that module is going to contain all of the animations that we're going to use. And that way we can call it from any script. We won't have to rewrite the code. And on top of that, we can infinitely add effects and animations to it as we please. So we'll add a modules folder in here. Inside of it, a new module script, which we're going to name UI effects. Get access to this module script. First, get replicated storage, get a services section here, come down here, module references, effects, wire, replicated storage.modules.UI effects. Now we have access to it. And then in here, instead of manually animating in this script, call to the UI effects module and animate the button. And if we add any more effects for any other things like frames or any hovering we want to do on other items, we can just come in here and add alternate descendant checks right in here and then call things from the same module as we add them in. So it's super flexible and reusable. And if you want to add anything else to it in the future, you totally can. Inside this module, we're going to need access to a couple of services, one being replicated storage, also going to need tween service. And finally, we'll get UIS or user input service. For the actual animation of each button, I like to use something called Fusion. It's made by LTOB, and it's a great library for any UI animation, and it makes things super easy, super lightweight. I won't go into a full tutorial of that here. All you need to know is the things that I'm going to be using, and you can just kind of follow along. But if you're interested in doing more UI programming and UI design, definitely check out Fusion. It's linked below. To make this the same way I am, you're going to need to go and at least go to the website and download that module. So Fusion isn't already in this project, so inside modules here, I'm going to insert it, and you can do that from insert from file here if you download it from his website, and then here's the Fusion library that we're going to be using. We won't use all of this, but it's a great tool and something you definitely are going to want to check out if you're into UI design. We're going to get a couple Fusion references. One is Fusion itself, or acquire it from replicated storage. We'll get a couple of events from Fusion, being hydrate and on event. So now we're going to get into the animation of the buttons, and the first thing we need to do is set up a few tween infos. I'm just going to call them info 1 and info 2. You can just copy these settings I type in here. They'll be pretty short. Tween info 2 will be pretty short. We'll do tween info.new in just 1/20th of a second. Now we can set up a new function module.animate button press. We're going to want to pass in a button that we can animate. We're going to type check it as a GUI button. So in here, we're going to have a few tween settings that carry through. We're going to go local click tween, which we'll define in a minute, and hover tween we'll also define. And then original size, OG size, we'll set to button size. We need to use this to reset the button once your mouse moves off of it. Now we're going to hydrate this button, means passing through properties to it. We're going to start it with an on event, mouse button 1 down. And when that event gets triggered, when you click the button, we're going to create a new function. We're going to spawn a new task, an anonymous function, set click tween, tween service 8. So we're going to create a new tween as click tween, using the button info 2, and then we'll create a new property table here of the values we want to tween, which is just going to be size first. We'll do udim2.new. So that's the size, original size.x.scale. And we are going to want to shrink it when you actually click on it. So we'll go 0.9, 0 on the offset there. Size.y.scale is going to be multiplied also, and then 0 on the offset also. And we're just going to play the click tween. And if you had a sound effect you wanted to play, but also play that right here. But we don't. So after we have mouse button 1 down completed, we're just going to copy this down here and paste it again. Instead of mouse button 1 down, we're going to have mouse button up. Still going to create a new function here. We're going to use button info 2. We're going to set it back to the initial size instead of shrinking it. And now we also have a couple more events to pass through. This is going to be when you hover over button with your mouse. Say on event, mouse enter, spawn a task with a function. Here we're going to say hover tween, tween service. Here I'm going to type a comment so it doesn't do weird formatting, but we can ignore that and we'll remove it in a second. We're going to set size, the size property, new udim. original size.x.scale. Want it to expand a little bit when you hover over the button. By 1.06. Go 0, and then original size.y.scale. Also times 1.06. After we set that, we're going to come down here and just play hover tween. And we're going to copy this whole event, paste it again. Instead of mouse enter, you guessed it, we're doing mouse leave. Instead of setting size to a new UDMX, set it back to size. Original size is a copy, the button size at the beginning. Once that's all buttoned up, for now, we are done with this animate script. Come back to UI helper, UI effects, button press, ascendant, since it's a button. Now we're gonna hit play and see how this is coming along so far. All right, and it looks like something isn't working, so let's open up output and find out. Okay, after looking through the error, simple mistake here, but I actually don't need to spawn a task. We can just call the function like this, so we'll go back through here and remove all the task spawns. All right, and now that we've hit play, you can see that when we click on the button, it scales down, pops back up. When we hover over it, it expands a little bit and then shrinks back down. Now we still have to do this button pressing into itself when we hold down like this, but for now, this is a good start. I should add another nice benefit of using this UI helper and effects module system that I have here is that you actually can just create buttons, and then we'll go through and add the tags on them in a second here, but you don't have to manually animate all of these. You can just say, yep, animate this one button this way, and it automatically applies all of the animations. So before I forget again here, we'll go and we're gonna have to click on this button here, create a tag called press button. We'll come here on the buy button here in the starter pack, also add press button. We're going to come into UI helper here where we have this if statement. We're also going to check not only if it's a GUI button, check if ascendant as tag press button. This way we can have multiple tags for different kinds of button animations for different buttons. And we can check to make sure it's the right animation for the right button before we apply it. So let's say we have a button that we just want to rotate side to side when we hover over it instead of clicking in, and check if it's ascendant as tag button rotate. And we could set that up by effects here, but we don't have that for now. So all right, so the last thing we need to do is come into the exit button here and also this other button, but we want to tween this whole color section from its current Y to Y.5. When we do that, it'll look like the button is pressed in on itself. And then when we release it back to 0.4, where it was at, like the button clicked up, creating that nice tactile feel. So to do that, we're going to create another tween here called press tween. And since color has different positions depending on what button we're doing, because we have to tweak it a little here and there, we're going to want to save local the position. It's button.color.position. We're just going to come into mouse button 1 down here. We're going to want to define what press tween does. Tween of button.color. We're going to use info2 and then create a new property table here. We're going to say position, the OG color position.x.scale. I'm going to set it to 0.5, 0. This will bring it down into the other button. Then here, say press tween play. We're going to want to copy this, bring it down into mouse button 1 up by bringing this up and just setting the position correctly, the original color position, play the press tween. Let's give that a look and see how it goes. Now you'll see that when we hover over it, presses in, but it doesn't actually come up when we move our mouse off like we want it to. So in that case, we might want to change the event where it releases itself not on mouse button 1 up, because sometimes our mouse isn't over that, but we're going to want to change it to the mouse leave event. Fortunately, that's going to be pretty easy to do here. Bring it down to mouse leave here, paste it in, and then play again and see how that looks. And there we have a good button effect. And see if we mouse over it, but we don't actually ever click in, it just tweens the color back to its original position, which doesn't change it at all. So it doesn't look like anything happens. We click in, it sinks into itself. And then as we leave, it comes back up. Now, since we're overwriting things to the same tween, actually, you could actually also probably leave that tween in there. Then it could come up whenever you let go or whenever you mouse off. So we'll come in here and copy this. I guess we're coming back and pasting it in mouse button 1 up. Sometimes overlap is the way to make things feel as good as possible. There we have it. Thumbs up when we let go of it. Super juicy looking, super satisfying. Thank you guys so much for watching through to the end. If you've stuck around this far, you've seen how to create the shop window, how to make it look like it has the same style and feel as Pet Simulator, animating the buttons and making sure they populate well across any button you add. And you can just go through and populate this with whatever you have in your game. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful at all, make sure you hit like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments what other videos you want to see me do. Thinking a Fusion tutorial could be good. Definitely some basic Windows system stuff. as well as how to maybe combine images and gradients to make things look super shiny. Let me know what you thought. Thanks for sticking around. Bye-bye.